Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Now Next Later for Monday, September 8th. I know as we have people move over from the waiting room, we like to give a minute intro here. Today, I'm super excited to talk to our guest, Terri Davis, which we'll get to in 1 second. But the show is being brought to you by Cloudvirga. And so I always want to mention at the outset so that I don't forget that Cloudvirga has created Tropos. It's a next generation loan portal. We'll be talking today a lot about how to think about data, how to use consumer data, how to use property data, and then how to use transaction data. And so if you need a platform where borrowers can access the same workflow that your team is, and it's all in one place, end to end, that's what Cloudvirga is thinking about. That's what they're building. So thank you for sponsoring Cloudvirga. And thank you, Terri Davis, for being here. It's great to see you.
Hey, Jeremy. Great to be here. Happy Monday.
Same to you. Anytime it's after Labor Day, it almost feels like a new season of
It
the
does.
industry. And then
Yeah.
football's also starting, so people jump in with the sports analogies. But for me, it just feels like a fresh start today. So I'm glad we're here together.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And maybe we could just start real quick updating us on your role at Cotality, what you're building at Cotality, and then we can kind of jump
Yeah.
in to those
Happy to
questions.
do that. Yeah. So I joined Cotality about 18 months ago, and we're an international company actually operating in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and America. And in the US, we primarily serve insurance, real estate, and mortgage, but we're in a lot of adjacent markets, capital markets, and other end markets. And my role in our organization is to focus on the mortgage end market and to bring all of our vast property data and analytics assets to mortgage to serve multiple use cases. One of the things my team is really focused on is, this is probably an overused term, but to democratize data. When I looked at how customers primarily have consumed our data historically, it's in big bulk data delivery or SFTP, old school data delivery. And increasingly, we see the opportunity to deliver data much more nimbly, either through an API or in the cloud, or more recently in smart data platforms that allow mid-market and customers with less sophistication to take advantage of our data
Mhm.
in order to drive lots of different use cases, marketing, sort of top of funnel use cases, operational use cases, risk management use cases, et cetera. So I'm having a lot of fun. We have a lot of rich data and analytics that we can benefit the market.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, one of the things that comes up on Now Next Later all the time is data management.
Yeah.
And then, as like a related topic to that is, does data management change your adoption rate, your usage rate, your efficiency? Because you can have, and I think I've heard you say this, you can have all the data in the world. And if you're not partnering and using tools and solutions to understand that data and apply it to your business, it's irrelevant. And so that's what
Yeah.
we're going to try to talk about today is like, how do we think differently about this blizzard of data that is swirling around us all day, every day in our businesses, and then kind of apply the now, next, later framework to it. And so I couldn't think of a better person for that than you to tell us. So I was trying to think about even where to start. Obviously, data management and adoption is where we always start the conversation on the show. But I was thinking like, you know, we have different buckets of data. So I've put it in the chat for our audience, just at a very simple level. We have consumer data, we have property data, and we have transaction data. So
Yeah.
consumer data and property data are actually living, breathing things. And transaction data is living and breathing, but only for a short period of time while that consumer is going through the process of getting whatever it is, purchase loan, refi, different types of refi, HELOC, whatever it is. So one of the things I thought was, we haven't done this on the show before, but for our now bucket, I was just going to throw out at you something I used to do at Rocket, right? Start, stop, continue. Like when
Okay.
we think about data management and you're hearing from, and as you said, you're hearing from lenders that are scaled national lenders, and you're hearing from mid-market players who are trying to understand how to level up, and you're hearing from individual actors on the street originating or participating to feed leads and loans into that infrastructure. So thinking through all that, it's going to be hard, I know, because they may all have slightly different needs. And so I thought just around the data management for, what you're seeing, and that universe of data that you help people plug into and
Mhm.
access, is there something we'll just go with, like, um, continue doing? Because we often say, like, the industry's bad at this, and I'm guilty of saying that too often. What should the industry continue doing? What should, from your perspective, what are we doing that we should continue doing?
Well, just sticking to transaction data for a
Hmm.
second, one of the
Yeah.
things that I've observed in the last few years that the industry's done a much better job at, we should continue doing, is around measuring the transaction pipeline, productivity, defects, ultimately profitability. And, I can look back 5 years ago and find that a lot of independent mortgage banks didn't do that very well.
Hmm.
Especially. So I think
Yeah.
that industry has improved tremendously in understanding its operating metrics and it's what's driving profitability. And lots of tools have come to market like Gallus or other tools that enable lenders to do that much more effectively. But that's something we're doing better. I've heard you and
Hmm.
Sasha talk a lot about rationalizing tech stack, and I think there
Hmm.
has been an emphasis as people have had capacity and we haven't been as busy and we went crazy buying tech during the refi wave, right? So rationalizing your tech stack, realizing you have redundancy in terms of what your tools are capable of, particularly for distributed retail where you allow a lot of autonomy regionally. People are running their
Hmm.
own P&Ls or something. There's a lot of opportunity, especially, when you think about how you want to leverage data, top of funnel or post transaction, to
Hmm.
rationalize data across distributed retail in terms of like CRM data sets, and how you're capturing data, for example, in Encompass downstream, that will help you grow your business sort of in the next phase. And so rationalizing tech stack and understanding those redundancies and trying to consolidate information so it can be used better to help you understand your customer, personalize relationship down the road or in transaction, mitigate
Hmm.
risk, et cetera. I think those are things we're doing now and we need to continue doing, to help accelerate our ability to be successful and more profitable in this next phase or next wave of a business that we all anticipate is coming.
Yeah, that's been an interesting topic to think about, which is, you know, how much more volume do I need to do to be at the level of profitability that I want? And it's always sort of been a fundamental thing when you talk,
Yeah.
especially to IMB founders. They
Yeah.
understand profitability dramatically, especially through the cycles. But often people say I need to do more volume, and a lot of, in the consulting world, a lot of consultants I'll speak to, they'll ask first and foremost, why? Why do you have to
Yeah.
do more volume? What's the goal there? Because if you do more volume at a less profit, you really better make sure you're right. You really better make it
Yeah.
work. So it sounds like we're getting a lot better at that. Are there still, or what are the lingering misconceptions? What are the lingering sort of old way of thinking that still is a challenge or an obstacle to your business or to the industry that we should at this moment kind of stop, just let it go, whatever that let it go
Uh-huh.
philosophy is?
Yeah. All right, a couple of things. I want to go in two directions here. One is around the LO's control of the transaction.
Hmm.
And I'm a huge believer and fan in referral-based distributed retail models. I
Hmm.
completely understand it's the space I grew up in. Um, but sometimes that old school mentality about origination drives inefficiencies and limits your ability to literally leverage data downstream. And I guess the best example of that is around the capabilities we all now have in terms of originating digital in a digital way, right? In terms of
Hmm.
assets and income in particular. But
Hmm.
even the appraisal is now all digital in terms of how we're ingesting it and what we're using it for. And it seems like a lot of lenders haven't adopted digital asset verification, digital income verification, because they allowed the LO to really collect all those documents up front and stick them into a workflow that requires OCR and da 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 da. And I realize not every borrower is going to be digitally enabled, but the data says a lot of consumers, all the way from Gen X or Gen Z, to baby boomers, really appreciate a digital experience, a hybrid personal digital experience, and they want the process to be easy. And so
Yeah.
I'd say, gosh, I wish more LOs were required to really allow for consumers to digitally verify income and assets as a part of the transaction instead of doing it all old school and collecting paper first. And they do that because they want to control what the underwriter sees, right? And we just
That's
have
right.
to, we have to get past that. So that's one of my beefs. I'll let you comment on that before I go to my other one.
Okay, yeah, but real quick, I've often talked about how the ability for the industry to step up and evolve is
Yeah,
making experts more expert, whether that's your underwriters, your
yeah,
MLOs. We have to be able to do more complex and harder products and projects within our
yeah,
businesses. So what you just said resonates with us here is because that's exactly what I've been saying. How do you get the best person in your shop to do even more, to do better, to do the next hardest thing? And in housing, as you and I have experienced many times, we have tons of products we're not doing. We have tons
yeah,
more to be doing. Like, you get good
so
at
true.
this, great. Let's do condos better. You get good at condos,
Yeah,
let's do fix and flip better. You do that, let's do something else. Like, there's always a harder, more complex housing challenge that we're not focused on, and we could be.
yeah.
So I love that. And so, what was the
We should,
second? Oh, go ahead.
well, we should talk. I mean, I think we'll talk when we're talking about later about agentic AI and how
Mhm.
it does enable more originators, underwriters, people in the flow to be smarter and better advisors to their customers and to do harder things.
Right on.
I look really excited about those innovations in the industry. The other peeve I have, and you
Yeah.
will recognize this from probably your Stratmore experience, is our inability to do good lead attribution and to measure
Mm.
lead
Yeah.
leads. And you know, mortgage bankers in particular, but I think a lot of lenders who are in the consumer direct business throw a lot of money at buying leads.
Hmm.
And then they lose sight of the, in the of the value of that lead because they aren't able to really measure attribution through the loan cycle. And a lot
Hmm.
of that is because they leave it up to an LO to say, where did this lead come from? And some LOs aren't really sure. So I think that there's both data and people in that process of lead attribution and that sort of final mile of understanding how valuable a lead source is really problematic in the business. And I understand why. I think there's a lot lost through transactions. But I'd love to see us be better at that because I think we'd be much smarter at how we spend our marketing dollars if we were better at lead attribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that um, makes lead attribution a perfect segue is you really do have one foot in both worlds of now and next.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've seen from the consumer research we were talking about a minute ago, one of the things I've seen be really effective is actually taking a weakness and flipping it to a strength within your mortgage company. So instead of asking for data, tell them what you already have and ask them to confirm it or supplement or augment it. That
Mhm.
small change doesn't maybe seem like a lot from the mortgage side perspective. It makes a huge difference to how the consumer feels about the process. Oh, you know
100%.
about this? You know this about me? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. No, that's not true anymore. Wait, let me give you even more. Is it going to benefit me to give you more? Great. I'll get a better
Yeah.
price. Here you go. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, that data collection that you were saying is the old school mentality of, I got to collect it, I got to look at it, then I got to put it in. For the underwriter,
I'm
you can,
controlling it.
yeah, you can change that culture in a positive way. So instead of saying, that, stop collecting PDFs, which we've been saying for years, now we're saying, actually, you're going to give the best experience you possibly could because we're going to digitally show this consumer everything we know about them, and they're going to tell us if it's right or wrong
Yeah.
anymore. And so, talk to me about how your work and what advice you're giving in that specifically up funnel where the consumer experience can be paired with the data partner to make that actually feel fundamentally different for everyone, the LO and the consumer. Where are
100%.
we? Yeah, where are we on this, and what's next?
Yeah, there's a lot of capabilities here, right? If you think about, especially in the retention and recapture space,
Mm-hmm.
in lead acquisition, brand new lead, you don't know anything about it, harder to augment what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly there's lots of data available to enrich what you know as that consumer tells you more about themselves. And that's how I think about how lenders should think about top of funnel is how do you enrich what you know about a customer in your data that helps drive a personalized experience, a personalized workflow, and to your point, Jeremy, enables the customer to sort of architect their own path. And that's, I think, where agentic AI will also help quite a bit, because in the consumer experience, providing real-time advice and guidance with enriched data takes them on a very customized journey. And when you think about the feedback you get from somebody like a JD Powers or the Stratmore CX, or even our own analysis at Cotality, consumers very much want to feel like you understand their unique circumstances and can drive them down a process that's specific or unique to meet their needs, their affordability, their product needs, their property needs, depending on how you're engaging them in the life cycle of their mortgage. There's a lot of opportunity on the retention and recapture side of the funnel where, you know, lenders do a pretty poor job of retaining and recapturing their customers. I think it hovers in like the 20 percentile, and servicers think they have information in the servicing book in terms of behavior. They don't really pair that and really embrace additional data insights in order to deliver a much more elegant experience for that consumer that would lead to a higher retention and recapture rate. So those are things that I wish lenders took more advantage of, is in that top of funnel space. How can you enrich your data and enable a more personalized experience that drives the customer workflow and makes them feel better about the process? We're not replacing the human. We're just kind of building a hybrid process where the data enriches the process so that, gosh, I'm feeling better about my experience with you, Mr. Loan Officer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. You just gave me the image that pops into my head when we have this conversation is one where I like to think of, at least in the next category, and maybe later it gets really interesting with digital UX and tools. But in the short run, I like to think of the power of agentic AI, or AI just in general, as almost like a sidebar of information that is feeding you the stuff you need to know while you're doing your job. The stuff you don't want to rely on a mental checklist. You do absolutely engage your experience, but your experience isn't necessarily driving the task or the next task. It can, once you've been doing it for long enough, but it's not supposed to, right? That experience is supposed to keep you dynamic and elevate the conversation, elevate the product, elevate the workflow. And so I always think of it as like sort of that sidebar that I'm, as someone who travels frequently, I always think about, like, whenever I call Delta, just off of my phone number, they always know it's me calling, and it's not a ton of information that they have, but it's my name and my status
Your
and
member ID status,
where I'm going tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah.
We haven't really, as far as I can tell, leveraged that. Can you talk a little bit specifically, if possible, about how lenders can think about, and I'll just pose it the way I would think about it, but you tell me how they should think about it, which is something comes in to the system, some flag, some indicator. Okay, what do we know about this address? What do we know about this person? What's the last time I saw something from them? And it might come back nothing, and then you got to go get it somehow, buy it, collect it, whatever. But I think for the most part in our industry, there's a lot of touch points. How specific can lenders get on something comes in, some activity or indicator or flag from the book of business, like you said, the service portfolio, or from my lead gen partner, and now I'm off and running? How should lenders be thinking about, what do I already know? What do I need to know? And changing their mentality.
So much of the transaction is available. And ignored as a part of what you know about your previous customer, right? And so I would start with that. Like, okay, we know where you live and we know what kind of house you have. And we probably know, based on a recent AVM or something dynamically pulled in that moment, what your likely equity is, because we know how many liens you have. We can also probably tell if you own other properties. There's a bunch of information I can serve to a loan officer in Salesforce or their CRM that helps them immediately understand more of the profile of this customer and what they have in their property in terms of an asset. You may also be able to discern, based on what you know from the application data you had from that customer early on, do they have a lot of kids? Could they be moving up? Could they be moving down? Can you use sentiment analysis or propensity models to help you better understand what this customer's needs are and how to best serve them? And the more engaged you are, the more the customer feels like you know them, the more loyal they'll be, the more receptive they'll be to your offer. And option, I guess, optimally, what you want to do is be able to deliver to that customer the best possible offer at the best possible time. And of course, that's before your competition. And you earn,
Yeah.
we kind of have earned the right to have that first pass at the customer based on them being your current customer. And I wish more lenders took advantage of enriching their current portfolio information in order to serve customers more specifically and to personalize their engagement. Instead of just sending, like a monthly equity report, like some lenders do, how can you be a partner in their homeownership journey and really help them think about how they build wealth, how they save money on their mortgage, how they save money on home maintenance? That homeownership journey is complex and expensive. And the more you can engage them through the life cycle of the homeownership journey, the minute they call in or the minute you identify a signal of them having a need, you're already ingrained in them as a trusted advisor. And now you're bringing additional insights into the conversation that build that likelihood of connection and loyalty.
Yeah, that I love that. I've been saying this, I find myself saying this a lot lately, but I think that must mean it's a good, we're going in the right direction, which is, I do think propensity is the word of the year for the next year, right? I think a couple years ago it was data science. I think last year's obviously AI, and agentic AI is probably
Yeah.
going to overlap somewhere with that. But I actually think the pendulum's going to swing back a little bit. And in the next year, this time, next MBA annual, it's going to be all about propensity. What indicators do you know? What can you do? So I love that you said that. And also, I think lenders overestimate how easy customization can be to start. To get started and iterate. I think a lot of people are like, oh, customization sounds like too big a hill to climb. Instead of what you said, which is start with one thing. Start with one thing. Is this still true about you? You still own this property? And we get some of that, I think, from the big lender servicers who pre-populate the old loan application in there. Like, is this still true? Or are you still, everything from your 1003 last time? Like, start there at least. But there's all of this other trended data, lean data that you could be using. And now suddenly everybody feels immersed in the process, in the experience. And you're really just serving up what you already knew or could know.
Yeah. And that's such an icebreaker when you're engaged with a customer, especially on the phone, but even via email, that, hey, this is what I know about you. And you feel familiar. It feels familiar to you and feels special. And it's more of a trusted engagement. That's the beginning. JD Powers talks a lot about this in their, best of originator, best of servicers, about that personalization and the engagement and the digital experience being the two primary differentiators between the top and the rest. And you do not need to be Rocket to be able to deliver those solutions. And, Regions and Prosperity and some other IMBs are among the top with JD Powers because they take that extra effort to deliver a personalized digital experience. And so, yes, a lot of, I think what I love about what I do for a living is democratizing data to enable more customers to be able to deliver that kind of experience to their customers is really quite fun. And there's this huge digital divide right now, Jeremy, that drives me crazy, that doesn't need to persist. That, if you're this giant lender who has the ability to invest in cloud infrastructure and build a big, complex, sophisticated data lake and have BI tools, et cetera, it feels like you really have a competitive advantage. And, mid-size and smaller lenders who are kind of siloed in their data and haven't invested in big data infrastructure feel like they can't reach those levels, but I'm here to tell them that they can. And it's exciting. It's an exciting, sort of close to next, right? It's now for some, it's easily next for everyone. Anyway, I get excited about it. Sorry about that tangent.
I'm glad you do. We do too. I mean, that's why it's such a great conversation, because I think you're exactly right. Like, we make these assumptions that sort of bigger and more resources means it's always going to win the consumer's heart and mind. And that just actually hasn't been the story of consumer tech or consumer markets overall. I sometimes think of it, this is a silly example because the price of a cup of coffee to the price of a house is two totally different things. But everybody said that Starbucks was going to come in and put all the mom and pop coffee shops out of business. Nobody wants that experience anymore. They want to go in and get the same cup of coffee with the fancy name from Starbucks on every corner. And actually the opposite happened. People started ordering more coffee from more places, more coffee shops showed up, and Starbucks also scaled. So there wasn't a, like, Starbucks put everybody out of business and there's no such thing as the neighborhood coffee shop. It's just the whole thing changed and nobody
Yeah.
expected it. And so I think there's a version for our industry to learn from it. Like I said, cost is very different, life moment, milestone, very different. But I think we should start thinking about exactly the way that you mentioned, which maybe that's also where we go from next into later, because one thing you made me think of that you and I have talked about, but I don't think we've ever talked about it in this setting, which is I think lenders are too sensitive, believe it or not, with telling the consumer everything they know about them. I think consumers want that, and I think lenders kind of sometimes hold back and don't say, here's everything we know about you, because like, oh, people are going to get scared. Do you get a sense that lenders are too conservative when it comes to like engaging the consumer the way we've just been describing? Like, where does this go next and later?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I do think it's lacking. But I don't understand the conservative nature of it, to be honest with you. I think it's more of a capability thing.
Okay.
Lenders largely think of CRM as sort of top of funnel for new acquisitions. And in the subsequent engagement with a client that they know, it's left to servicing or call center. They might have Velocify, right, where they're like bringing in data in order to engage that customer. But they're not enriching that data to the extent that they could. So it's a great question about why. I don't know. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very interested to see as we move to later and talk a little bit about AI and what you think is next for or what's coming for the mortgage industry next year. I think that is where we might see somebody engage a lot more directly and dramatically with consumers and say, if we work together on this, I'll give you everything I know, you give me everything you know, we'll do a great deal and we'll do it for much more efficiently and cheaper than anybody else because of that partnership. And I don't think we've seen that quite yet, not from the Rockets or anything like that. So really interesting. So I'll leave you with that setup, which is we always end on something, aspirational, inspirational for this industry. If I'm CEO of a lender, if I'm the chief product officer at a lender, what should I be thinking about? What should I be ready for that I need to be building towards that is coming next year?
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about AI, and obviously it's been a big topic. I think where people have started was around chat GPT sort of experiences where you've got chatbots in your experience, and that's really not the next level. I think agentic AI is the next level where there's a lot more collaboration and engagement, not just between the consumer and the LO, but throughout the operations process that up levels everybody's skill and competencies and drives a lot of efficiency. So you get a great experience for the consumer in guiding them to the best products and connecting them with the best advisor and engaging them in more of their information proactively, like we've been discussing. And that all happens in a digital experience, which most customers like to start with. But then it's fulfilling the mortgage in a much smarter way. And I think when we get to MBA and in January, we're going to be talking about what ROI are we actually seeing in these agentic AI implementations? Because there's some early adopters out there already putting them into place. And we're going to be starting to see how that works. And I know you and Slasha talk a lot about this in your podcast, and that is change management.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an Achilles heel of our business, right? And some of it is based on, I'm in a 10-year-old instance of Encompass, and I really can't like put more customization and process into this thing to figure out how to use these agents. But I think the great news about these agents is that they can use, large language models and other sources to overcome some of your issues with super customized fields, free form fields, and a bunch of other things that have made you inefficient previously. So I think we'll be talking a lot about AI agents and the great ROI we get from implementing AI agents. And really, I hope that drives more adoption around digital income and asset verification and those kinds of things that will help create more efficiency. So I think that's a big part of what I expect. I expect we'll also talk a lot about increased delinquencies and foreclosures coming up. And data can really help you mitigate and manage those risks. And all big servicers kind of see payment behavior, but what other insights can you be benefiting from? A propensity to have issues, information about their credit debt, those kinds of things can really help you be smarter about mitigating risk related to foreclosures and delinquencies. And then finally, I'd say what will continue to persist is personalization and the use of data in order to enable a better consumer experience. And your business strategy should drive your data strategy. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're a mortgage lender, what is my mission in business? Am I a one and done, monetize my transaction kind of lender? Or am I trying to build customers for life and retain and recapture their business over time? And if you are a customer for life kind of lender, and you're probably investing in a referral business with loan officers that you hope will, have that rapport and retain that customer, you need to invest in tools and data in order to enable a full lifetime life cycle of returning recurring mortgage opportunity and serve your customer more broadly than just, hey, you need a refi, you want to know about equity, and help them on their home ownership journey and really help them believe that you're an advocate for them to build wealth for their lifetime and not just in this for the next mortgage transaction. So I think we're going to be talking about that. I think that's a lot of part about what's next is this idea of changing to personalization and digital experience to build lifetime relationships instead of transactional relationships.
Yeah, that is so powerful because what you're actually saying is, why aren't you using the lessons you're learning in every area of your business to improve every other area of your business?
Yeah,
And if
that's better said.
you said it the best. If we're able to engage somebody in a servicing context or a loss mitigation context and make that contextual and make that personalized and improve the communication, why wouldn't we take those lessons and plug them in up funnel? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
we also figure out a way to use that when somebody calls in, our 1-800 number, our,
Yeah.
entry form online, or our lead gen provider sends us 5 pieces of information. Let's start right away making that feel as us as possible because we've learned these lessons somewhere else and we're picking them up and putting them over here. And I think more and more I'm hearing lenders ask, like, how do I get more holistic about this? And that's a
Yes.
huge question. So
Yeah.
your ability to partner with someone, help use data, make it contextual, then AI really just becomes this infrastructure that's helping
Yeah.
you scale your culture, helping you scale your experience rather than some threat. It's just, hey, I learned
Well
this over
said.
here because look at this. Now I'm going to plug it over here. Now I've solved 2 things. Let's move on to the next one. I love that vision of the future.
Yeah. Well said. You said something that I also want to just mention, and that is one of the things we can do better, and I think we'll do better into the future, is better understanding my lost leads, my payoffs. Where am I losing business and why? And that's imminently understandable now, but very
Yeah.
few people actually invest in understanding it, which is just a, match and append data exercise. Like what
Yep.
happened to these leads after they left me, or what happened to this mortgage when they paid off and went somewhere else. And having partnerships that enable you to have those insights faster than looking at HMDA data in the review mirror and going, oh, that's where I went, that's who I'm competing with, would help more mortgage lenders, I think, be more nimble and sharp about being more competitive. So another opportunity, I think, to use what lessons learned is what you said, how am I applying my lessons learned? Well, let's learn faster. Let's look
Yeah.
every month at our lost leads, or let's look every month at who paid off and understand why.
Yeah, that's excellent. So thank you so much, Terri, for being here. I would welcome you back so we could talk more about this because I want to talk
Oh,
to you all
thanks, Jeremy.
afternoon for sure. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you for everyone for joining us live. We love when you do. I hope you will also share the link as it goes out later today on YouTube. Share that with anybody you think needs to hear these insights. And then thank you, Cloudvirga, for helping us bring these conversations. And Terri, we'll definitely see you at some upcoming events, but on the road, and we'll see you back on Now Next Later soon. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeremy. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Take care, everybody.